أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضاه ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث صدق الله العلي العظيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين سيما بقية الله في الأرضين. Brothers and sisters, respected elders, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, the discussion has progressed quite a bit so far, and I'd like to start by thanking the organizers again for, actually forcing me into this. Sometimes when the world puts pressures on you and it makes you actually stronger. Incidentally, that's what the entire series has been about embracing the burdens that fall on us so that we can become better people and actually become the best that we were potentially designed by Allah to be, so that we can become the heroes of the future, so that we can save the future generations, and so that we can become those elite soldiers of Imam al-Hujjah al-Qa'im al-Mahdi. Now, today's discussion is about this concept of being too religious. Many of you might have heard this. In general discussions, you'll hear people throwing this terminology around. That person's too religious, that person's not religious. Okay, we're going to be discussing and expanding on this idea. And the theme of today is that, no, we should be as religious as we can possibly be. Now, to open up this discussion, I'd like to introduce someone to you. Now, this might scare you before I say it, but bear with me, and don't worry. I'm gonna drive you through this. Don't worry, we're gonna get through this. What if I told you that there is somebody who's stopping you from becoming the best that you can be? There's somebody in your life who's actually holding you back. And every time you attempt the uphill struggle, every time you attempt to be a hero or do anything heroic, there's someone in your life who stops you and pulls you back. This someone, by the way, is more terrifying than a lot of the things that you could imagine it to be. This someone is more dangerous than the CIA. It's more dangerous. No, it's not yourself, but good guess. That would be a little bit cliched. I don't do cliches, guys. Sometimes I do, but admittedly. No, this someone is actually more dangerous than the CIA, more dangerous than the MI6. This someone is probably listening to you right now. I like to refer to him as Uncle Danger. Now, what Uncle Danger will do is every time you attempt to do something good or become better, Uncle Danger will stop you. And this is a quick disclaimer, because I am aware that some of my uncles might be listening. It's not about my uncles. All right, I'm talking about general uncles. There's a phenomenon in the community, and I'll illustrate this story that happened in my life to help us understand. So it was a long, long time ago, before I came to Hausa. Probably around 10 years ago, actually. And no, it's Uncle Danger. Let me explain. It's not Shaitan, it's Uncle Danger. Okay. So we were discussing, and we were young, and we were discussing about religion and stuff. And one of the young brothers, he was younger than me, he said, I really want to force myself and pray my 5 daily prayers. And I was like, yeah, that's good. That's really good. And then, we were having this conversation about becoming better Muslims, etc. And then there was this uncle who was sitting nearby, and he said, listen, this being religious, very good.
but extremism not good. No extremism. And he started going off on this, you know, about how extremism is very terrible and how, and I was just sitting there thinking, what are you talking about? Why are you even saying, you just scared this poor kid. He just wanted to pray his 5 daily prayers. So this is Uncle Danger. And by the way, if there's any aunties listening and, you know, they're laughing at this idea of Uncle Danger, hey, there's Auntie Danger too. She's in the community as well. And if all you youngsters are laughing as well, hey, you might be brother or sister Danger as well. In fact, even some scholars will perpetuate this idea of fear and hold our youths back from excelling with this idea of fear. And I'd like to remind you of the verse of the Quran, which says, إِنَّمَا ذَلِكُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ يُخَوِّفُ أَوْلِيَاءَهُ فَلَا تَخَافُوهُمْ وَخَافُونِي إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. It's only and only shaitan that makes you afraid of his allies. So don't fear him and fear me if you are mu'mineen. Okay, so shaitan, only shaitan is going to make you afraid. If anything is making you afraid of being a better Muslim, if there's any voice which holds you back from doing the right thing and becoming the hero that you have the potential to be, have no doubt that is the voice of shaitan himself trying to stop you from achieving your best. If you're reading too much Quran and this person says, oh, don't become extreme. If you're really focusing in your prayers, you're praying 5 times and you make sure that you do it on time, etc. And somebody comes and says, oh, no, don't do that, that's extreme. This is the voice of shaitan who is making you afraid of what people will think and what, getting into trouble even. If there's a brother or sister out there, they want to do the greatest of all jihads. As we said in the previous episodes, they want to do kalimatun haqqin inda sultanin ja'ir. The Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi taught us that the best of jihads is to speak a word of truth in the face of a tyrant. And a youth wants to do that, or even somebody in the older community wants to do that, but they get held back. The one holding them back is speaking the words of shaitan. And look at what the verse says. Don't fear them. Don't fear the allies of shaitan. Fear me if you are believers. Remember, the status of a believer is above Muslims. And we've been talking about how you need to be a mu'min, really believe in order to be a hero. And how does he do it? يُوَسْوِسُ فِي صُدُورِ النَّاسِ مِنَ الْجِنَّةِ وَالنَّاسِ. The shaitan, he whispers into the hearts of men from among the jinn and among the men. This is what uncle and auntie and brother and sister and Maulana Danger do. They make you afraid. There's this beautiful concept which will actually help us to understand this a little bit better. Sheep. Let's look at sheep for a moment. So sheep, when you've got a whole load of sheep, what you need is a sheep dog. And what the shepherd does with the sheep dog is the dog will scare all the sheep into going together. And we make fun out of sheep because all sheep, they just follow the sheep in front. They just keep on following and they have no mind of their own and they're not very brave. So when the dog comes, the sheep get scared and they go into the confinement and the shepherd can just close the door and ta-da, you've controlled all the sheep. Right. People today, particularly in the Muslim community, have actually out-sheeped the sheep. How? Well, see, sheep need a sheep dog to keep them in line. But people generally, we don't even need a dog anymore. The police never get involved. It's not even the CIA. It's not even the authorities anymore. No. We sheep each other around. The sheep need a dog to keep them in line, but we people keep each other in line. And this is a phenomenon that exists among us today, where we become so placid that we just end up following the person in front. And if one person tries to do something ahead of the times, one person tries to fight against the Daghut, fight against the wolves that are trying to attack the flock, other sheep will stop it from happening. So we people are not actually people anymore. We're actually sheeple. That's what we've become, sheeple. And these are, by the way, this concept was elucidated by David Icke, incidentally, a famous conspiracist who's actually been banned on YouTube. Just a quick point about that. Think about the world that is being created around us now. Anybody who speaks against the mainstream narrative, which is being controlled by the enemies of Islam and by the Zionists, anybody who speaks against it, even if you're not a Muslim, anybody, you get blocked, you get silenced. So as much as they talk about freedom of speech, it's all a lie. And as we progress into the future, you should be certain about this, that whatever you hear from the mainstream, whether it's YouTube, whether it's CNN, Fox News, BBC, etc., is going to be a completely controlled narrative. And this feeds in onto the discussion that we're going to have. So extremism is what? Is there such a thing as extremism in Islam? No. There is no such thing as extremism in Islam. And it might not have hit you yet, so let me expand on this. Look, it is a good thing to be extremely Muslim. And let me explain how. Islam is actually moderation. If you look at all the facets of Islam collectively, it is all about moderation. It is Siratan Mustaqim. It is the right path. And following it will actually just make you moderate. So if you follow Islam to its extremes, all it's going to do is make you extremely moderate. Islam is peace. Islam is love. Islam is all those good elements. So if you follow Islam to its extremes, it will actually make you extremely generous, extremely kind, extremely thoughtful, extremely contemplative, extremely balanced. But the mainstream media has actually perpetuated this idea that if you are extremely Muslim, you're actually a danger and a threat to society and others around you. And one of the reasons why they've done that and why they've presented, groups like ISIS and Daesh and Takfiri Wahhabis and all of these dangerous terrorist type organizations as the face of extremist Islam is to keep us imprisoned, is to stop us from recognizing our true potential. Because now any time that any youth or grown person or anybody in the Muslim community wants to be a better Muslim, wants to pursue Islam to its extremes, they get shunned down. Oh no, don't be extremely Muslim because you'll end up like them. When in reality, those groups like the Saudi regime and the Takfiri Wahhabis and all of these groups are not extremist Muslims. They haven't followed Islam. So how can they be following the moderate path? They're not. What they've actually done is deviated. They have deviated from the path. So we shouldn't even refer to them as extremists because they're not extremists. If they were taking Islam to its extremes, then they would be loving humanity and giving back to humanity and teaching people and resisting not against ordinary people and killing ordinary people and just, massacring innocent people, but they would have faced against the real enemies of Islam. They haven't done that because Islam teaches us to do precisely that. And that's why the enemies have made us afraid to stop us from recognizing what Islam really is. And look, the Quran tells us, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. Surely we have made you the fair, medium, balanced nation. We Muslims, the bounty that Allah has given us is that we are the ones who are supposed to be defining what the medium is, what the balance is, what the middle path is. But we've allowed the enemies to present what the balanced path is for us. Okay? And I want to illustrate this point for you so that we can really understand what they've done. So, and I like to call this, in fact, before we come to that point, what do I mean by Islam being the definition of what is right and righteous and balanced? Well, it is simply the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt. It comes down to the Quran and Ahlul Bayt. Now, as you know, there is an imbalance in society where some have taken the Quran but abandoned the Ahlul Bayt, and some have taken the Ahlul Bayt and abandoned the Quran. Now, if you take the Quran but abandon the Ahlul Bayt, what happens? You become complete, like there's no balance there. And you become like these hard-hearted individuals who are out there, you know, killing innocent people, like the likes of ISIS, Daesh, and the Saudi regime. And then the other opposite extreme also exists, where if you take the Ahlul Bayt but abandon the Quran, you just think everything is about, oh, everything is just love. And you know, you abandon logic, your feet are no longer on the ground. You start to, your head just goes up into the clouds. And that's why you see so many people in the community who are just completely obsessed with history. And their entire focus becomes just pointing out how another sect is completely misguided. They don't recognize what's happening right now, or they become pseudo Sufis and they just, everything is love. Ooh, you know, Allahu, Allahu. They're not grounded to reality. They don't even talk about what's actually happening in the world, and their Islam, their version of Islam, actually becomes completely irrelevant. And all of this is inculcated within the verse, or rather the hadith of Thaqalain, where the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi held up the hand of Imam Ali alayhi salam and said, "Man kuntu mawla fahada aliyyun mawla." For whomsoever I am the master, this Ali is the master. This Ali is your Mawla too. And this is in Sunni books, Shia books, it doesn't matter. Look, the bottom line is the one appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be the leader of the Muslims was somebody appointed by Allah. It cannot be somebody appointed by me or you. Right? And at this point, guys, just to make it absolutely clear, it was at this point in Islamic history that the part of the verse was revealed. الْيَوْمَ أَكْمَلْتُ لَكُمْ دِينَكُمْ وَأَتْمَمْتُ عَلَيْكُمْ نِعْمَتِي وَرَضِيتُ لَكُمُ الْإِسْلَامَ دِينًا. This day have I perfected for you your religion, have I completed for you my favor, and become pleased with Islam as your religion. Look, if you think that Islam is limited to just fasting in the month of Ramadan and prayers and, you know, as-sawm and, you know, hajj and all of these things, you've missed the point completely, because all those things already existed before this incident took place. You see, and what Muslims today do is they compartmentalize the whole issue. They're like, Imam Ali, what was he? Yes, he was the fourth Khalif, or yes, no, he was the first Imam, and he was ma'asum, and what does that mean? He was infallible or immaculate, etc. You just go into these discussions. But let's zoom out for a moment and just look at what the basis of this reality was. Allah was basically saying that the religion, the fulcrum, the crux of it all is leadership. Back then, look, we look at it as imamah now. We look at it as khilafah. Back then, it was just politics. And it really is about divine politics. And incidentally, today, when anybody tries to talk about relevancy and the leadership of Muslims today, it will be Uncle Danger and Auntie Danger who says, don't go into politics. That's too political. This is their mentality, where they will say that, no, that's politics. Let's keep Islam separate. Now, we'll explore this a little bit more, but what it basically means is, look, you have to take the Quran and Ahlul Bayt together. Then you will understand what Islam is really about and how it makes it so relevant. Then you can traverse on the path of being a hero. When you bring the Quran and Ahlul Bayt together, then you become what the Quran refers to as كَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. You become that fair, just, balanced nation. If you bring the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt together, you become, what you are following now becomes what Imam Khamenei refers to as pure Muhammadan Islam. That's what it is referred to as Islam. Not Shia Islam, not Sunni Islam, no. Pure Muhammadan Islam, the Quran and Ahlul Bayt. Now, what the enemies have done to make us confused about what the middle path is what I like to refer to as the extremism spectrum. Okay, so I'd like to illustrate this by holding up this pen. And I hope you're all looking, and I hope you can see it clearly. So this pen, imagine that this is the extreme left. Okay, this is the extreme left. This is the extreme right. Okay, where is the middle? Very clear, right? It's right here. This is Islam. Islam is always right here. But the enemy does something very clever and conniving. وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. The enemies plot and they scheme, but Allah is the best of planners. This is what the enemies do. So right now it's clear that this is the middle path. Okay. The enemies introduce a new extreme. So they will introduce a new extreme right here. And this extreme will be so extreme that it will blow everything out of the water. Whoa, that's really extreme. Now this becomes the extreme right. Now, if this is the spectrum, where does the middle become? The middle is no longer here. It becomes this. Okay, what we recognized before to be the extreme right now becomes the moderate path. And this is what they've done to the Muslims. They've introduced certain things which are completely extreme in reality. But because that has now been joined to the spectrum, we now think that Islam, the moderate Islam, is right here, but Islam is actually still right here. This is still the middle. This is just an additional extremism that they've added to the thing. And to illustrate this point just a little bit deeper, and if you don't understand it, then inshallah, I'll try to explain it more during the question answer. And this, by the way, is the reason for why we accept somebody like Boris Johnson as the Prime Minister of the UK. And this is just a general explanation of it. See, they introduce people like Nigel Farage or the far-right extremists who are so Islamophobic and they hate Islam and they have such just pure hatred in their hearts and they're blatantly obvious about it, that we start to see the conservatives as moderate. Okay, this is what the enemies do. They introduce something which is so extreme that which would have been extreme to us now looks ordinary and it looks moderate. So be very careful of those who preach and perpetuate this idea of moderate Islam as opposed to extremist Islam, because they're speaking the words of shaitan. They're actually speaking the words of the enemy. Okay. Now, what extremism has actually done is extremism is just a word which has been coined to keep you imprisoned. If you look at anybody, like look at Muhammad Ali. Do you think Muhammad Ali reached his full potential by working out and training moderately? Of course not. You have to take your skills to its extreme. Look at anybody who you might admire and bear in mind the discussion that we had previously about how our role models should actually be higher people than these ordinary celebrities and people that we know. No, it should be a higher or ideal, okay? Everybody who ever accomplished something great took their abilities to their extreme. If you want to be extremely intelligent, you have to study extremely. If you want to be extremely effective, you need to have extreme principles based on Islam. And remember, it's always going to give you that extreme love which you need in your heart in order to progress and excel. Just a quick point about that. Somebody came to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam and asked him, where is love in the religion of Islam? And Imam Sadiq said to him, the religion of Islam is nothing but love and hate. Because if you have an extreme love for what is truth, you will have an extreme hatred on the opposite side for what is batil and what is falsehood. Okay. Now, what extremism, this term extremism does, and what the uncles and auntie dangers do in our society, and the scholars who perpetuate this idea as well, the Maulana dangers do as well, is they make you afraid of embarking on that journey, of speaking the words of truth. And you will experience this in your day-to-day lives, where they will actually make you afraid of becoming the best that you can be. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he is the example of the best of heroes. And he is somebody who, if you took our standards of what moderate Islam is and what extremist Islam is, then trust me, when Jesus returns, we're going to be looking at him as an extremist. When Imam Mahdi does the uprising, he is going to be looked at as extremist by the mainstream media. So we need to be very careful how we follow this. Now, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, one of the greatest examples of what a hero does, he sacrificed everything. Do you think that the uncle dangers didn't come and pester Imam Hussein? They did. They came and they told him. And look, they're not always aware of what they're doing. Sometimes they think they're well-wishers. And many well-wishers went to Imam Hussein and they said, what are you doing? You're going towards certain death, don't do it. They didn't recognize that this is the Imam of the time. This is a person who has a knowledge of the time that we're living in, and he knows what he's doing for the sake of Allah. They pestered him. Do you think the Holy Prophet Muhammad was not pestered? Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi was the best example of an extremist. See how the word right now, even as I say it, it makes me cringe a little bit as well. I understand that, because we have remember, the enemy uses language to imprison us. And the word Islamic extremism has been so heavily bombarded into our minds that it's affected our psyche. There's a prison now in our minds which stops us from embarking on the journey which in most eyes would look extreme, right? But you have to embark on it in order to reach your extremely high potential. When we say that the human being has the potential to be higher than the angels, it's not a joke. Just a very quick example from Sayyidah Khadija as well, since it was her death anniversary yesterday. Sayyidah Khadija, do you think people didn't tell her, what are you doing? You're being too extreme. Don't do this just for your husband. You know, you're spending all your money. She spent every penny for the sake of Islam and for the sake of her honorable husband. Every penny she had. If anybody does that in today's world, do you think people won't look at them and say, you know, that's a bit extreme. You should have been a bit moderate about that. Our true heroes, the ones who the Quran referred to as لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ, the perfect example, the perfect pattern, they are referred to as extremists. Okay, now, very quickly, I know I'm going over my time, but this is a final thing that I need to open up and expand on in order for us to fully comprehend this actual thing which is happening, this phenomena. Shaheed Malcolm X, rahmatullah alayhi, he came up, he actually explained a lot of these theories in a beautiful way. And what he said is that, okay, so a lot of yous are listening, so let me just quickly explain that, look, there are terrible things that America did in its history, and you won't be taught these things anymore in school. You have to go and find out what America actually is. One of the things that it did is it went to Africa and it took loads of black people and forced them into slavery. Now, what happened is, as years progressed, these black people who were slaves in America, they were actually indoctrinated to have a certain mentality. So Shaheed Malcolm explains it in this way. There were two types of slaves or Negroes in that time. There was the house Negro and the field Negro. Okay. Now, the field Negro worked out on the field. Okay. He worked out in the sun. It was really hard. He would have to do hard manual labor. You know, he wouldn't get good clothes to wear, and he would get whipped and beaten on a regular basis. Okay. Now, if you went to the field Negro and said, do you want your freedom? He would want his freedom. He would want to fight back in order to claim his freedom. The house Negro was different though. See, the house Negro lived in the house with the master. He lived in the big house with the master. He got nice clothes. He was, given nice food to eat. You know, he was never beaten. He was talked to like a friend. He was even made into a family member. If you went to the house Negro and asked him, do you want your freedom? You know what the house Negro would say? Freedom? I am free. I'm happy. I've got everything. I've got a roof over my head. I have a place in society. I'm somebody. Just like back then, you had field Negroes and you had house Negroes. Well, today too, we have field Muslims and house Muslims. And by the way, guys, today, the field Muslims are the ones out there who are being bombed, whose men and women and children are being slain. There are those ones who are literally out in the field, who are fighting and bringing the fight to the colonialists, who are just as evil, if not more evil today than they were back then. Don't think that slavery has ended. Slavery exists today. And most of the Muslims, unfortunately, that you will encounter, these auntie and uncle dangers, these Maulana dangers out there who are telling you and making you afraid, they're house Muslims. And actually what all they are is they are perpetuating this idea that you can comfortably live in the West, and they won't ever tell you the ground realities because they don't really know the ground realities, and they actually think they're free when they're not. They're actually living a life of perpetual fear to an extent. Okay, now, so this is very important that we recognize these two terms, the field Muslim and the house Muslims, and really recognize what's happening in the society around us. There are people who want to keep you imprisoned, and many a times they're the people in your own house, in your own family, in your own communities, and they do it because of fear and because of comfort. Fear and comfort are the two medicines that have been completely used by the shaitan to keep people in perpetual slavery. We are slaves, brothers and sisters, respected elders. We need to recognize that. Otherwise, when Imam Mahdi comes, just like Musa came to Bani Israel and told them that I want to free you, we won't even recognize that we need to be freed. Okay. Now, look, there is a mentality among, and I'm finishing the discussion, and I would like to go to question and answers, inshallah, but we have to explore this mentality a little bit more, just a few bit. I know it's been a very heavy dose today, but I'm just going to give you a little bit more, and then I'll drop it there, inshallah. The Quran describes a certain mentality. يَمُنُّونَ عَلَيْكَ أَنْ أَسْلَمُوا. They think they've done a favor upon you, that they have become Muslims. All right, this is the mentality that existed back then, and it exists today, guys, where people, and it comes back to these house Muslims, it comes back to these uncle and auntie and Maulana dangers. They think by becoming a Muslim, they've done some sort of a favor to Islam. You've done no favors to Islam. You have to understand that. And I hope it doesn't sound too harsh, but I'm getting to a point through this. You are not doing a favor upon anybody, okay? By being a Muslim. If you have struggled in any way for the cause of Islam, that is actually Allah bestowing a favor upon you. Because you can, and it applies to me as well, we can never ever say that we have done enough for Islam. Because all we have ever done is for our own good. The Quran tells us, in ahsantum, ahsantum li anfusikum. If you do good, you're only doing good for your own self. Okay, but the house Muslim mentality, this uncle, auntie, Maulana danger mentality, is a mentality where people satisfy themselves with thinking, I'm a Muslim, I pray my 5 daily prayers, I'm fasting in the month of Ramadan, I've done enough for Islam. No, you haven't. And if you think that Imam Mahdi needs you, we need to change this mentality right now. Because for the longest time, our scholars have been telling us, and look, there is a reality behind this, so I'm not completely shutting it down. There is a reality behind this idea that the Imam is waiting for you to change. There is a reality behind it. It's not the fact that we're waiting for Imam to do Zuhur. It's not the fact that we're just waiting for Imam, we're just sitting down and waiting. No, Imam Mahdi is waiting for us to change. But at the same time, if we make that change and we make that leap of faith and become the heroes of the future, we should never think we've done a favor to Imam Mahdi. The Quran tells us, Wallahu ghaniyyu wa antum fuqara. Allah is free of need. It's you who are in poverty. You're the one who needs help. You're the one for whom Allah, and this is the reason why Allah sent 124,000 Anbiya and 313 Rasul and 5 Ulul Azm prophets and 12 A'imma al-Athar, the 12 Imams, for your guidance, so that you will realize that you need these guides so that you can realize your full potential. And now I want to end with this final verse. And for me, guys, this is the most terrifying verse of the Quran, the scariest verse of the Quran. And it's not talking about hellfire. It's not talking about punishment, although many of the verses do talk about that. No, it's saying something, if we just contemplate on it for a moment, look, we are trying to be that generation, and inshallah, Allah will make us that generation which picks up the courage to take the fight to the enemies of Imam al-Mahdi, so that we can be those elite soldiers, so that we can be the heroes of tomorrow. If we don't, what's going to happen? The Quran, if we turn away from this sacred duty, what's going to happen? The Quran says, وَإِنْ يَتَتَوَلَّوْا Sorry, I have to read it. I'm afraid I'm going to get it wrong. So just give me a moment. It says, وَإِن تَتَوَلَّوْا يَسْتَبْدِلْ قَوْمًا غَيْرَكُمْ ثُمَّ لَا يَكُونُ أَمْثَالَكُمْ. That's what it comes down to. And that for me is the most terrifying verse of the Quran. Allah says in the Holy Quran, if you turn away from this burden, if you don't pick up this challenge, if you don't take this golden opportunity, you know what Allah's going to do? He's simply going to replace you with another people, and they won't be like you. Allah will simply replace us with another generation. Brothers and sisters, respected elders, if we don't pick up this challenge right now, dear brothers and sisters, dear youths out there, if you don't become a hero now, then you're just gonna live, you're just gonna go through your life. Inshallah, you go to heaven, but Allah's not even interested in you. He won't even, you are irrelevant. You won't matter. And just as history has kept on repeating itself, and people, and Allah has been just replacing generation after generation after generation, Allah will simply, maybe our kids' kids will pick up the burden of becoming those heroes, of facing those fears, of becoming the elite soldiers of Imam al-Hujjah al-Qa'im. And with that, I'd like to ask you all to send a loud and boisterous salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And before we go to question and answers, I'd like to remind the dear brothers and sisters and respected elders out there, if you'd like to sponsor any of these sessions, please do contact any of the management at the Lady Zahra organization. And we'll go to question and answers, inshallah. I know it's been a little bit of a heavy dose and overwhelming, but do feel free to ask any questions you like. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.
I guess participants are still thinking about questions, because the only question I have so far is why is chess haram?
Chess is haram. Well, you have to ask the marja that you follow. So if you follow Abbas Sistani, he says that it is haram. Imam Khamenei doesn't say it's haram. It's not haram if you're following Imam Khamenei. You'll have to ask the marjas why. Remember, we said about ahkam, you don't question it. It's just a matter of, yep, these are the do's and don'ts of the religion. And when you find out that something is haram, it's just simply haram. Yeah.
Okay, this next one is from a sister. Do we backbite if we make people aware of a president's performance? Oops, it just.
Of a president's performance?
President's performance, or about poor knowledge of celebrities who talk about everything and mislead people. Is this
No.
backbiting?
Okay, so first of all, backbiting applies to the Muslims, dear sister. It doesn't apply to non-Muslims. Secondly, because Muslims have a special, unique bond. Remember, we're saying that when somebody becomes a Muslim, it's like they're your brother, they're your sister now. They, the uncles and aunties out there become your uncles and aunties. They become like your family, and you don't backbite about your family. The ummah is like your family. Anyway, when it comes to, and even among the Muslims, by the way, if somebody does something on a public sphere, so if somebody gives a speech in public, or if somebody implements some sort of policy in the society, you can talk about it with other people. That is not riba. And this is a common misconception that unfortunately a lot of people have. If you see a certain scholar, they've said something terrible from the mimbar, and then you try to make people aware of that, and then they're like, oh, no, don't do riba. That's not riba. Riba, let me just quickly explain, is when a Muslim brother or sister has committed a sin and they feel guilty about it, or they have some sort of flaw and they don't like that thing about themselves. And what you do is you go and tell others about it, and then you take pleasure. Look at that guy. He did that disgusting thing, or he did something wrong, or she did something wrong. That's riba, okay? And riba is one of the major sins, and it eats away your iman. It's like a fire eating away your iman if we engage in it. And the Quran describes it as though you're eating the flesh of your dead brother. Okay, and the reason for that is because when you talk about somebody, a Muslim brother or sister, behind their back, they can't defend themselves. It is just like their corpse is being chewed up by you because they can't defend themselves. Okay, so yeah, that should answer the question.
Okay, this next one is why did the Prophet get to marry 9 wives? In a hypothetical situation, when a man could marry 10 wives and do them all justice, would that be halal?
No. Okay, so there's certain things which were only for the Holy Prophet, and after the Holy Prophet, nobody in the Ummah is allowed to marry more than 1 wife, unless you can do justice between them, and then it will be 4 wives. Okay, so up to 4 wives. The Holy Prophet did certain things in his lifetime for certain reasons. One of those reasons was to, for example, to keep. There was a tribal atmosphere in the time of the Arabs, right, where one tribe would be an enemy with another tribe, and in order to unite all of these people and keep the hostilities and stop people from actually fighting and murdering each other, one of the things that the Holy Prophet did was marry from different tribes in order to unite with them. Because as soon as he was married to a certain woman from a tribe, it meant that that tribe would see him as an ally, and it would stop a lot of the hostilities that existed, a lot of the aggression that existed. Another reason is that the Holy Prophet would marry somebody in order to get rid of something which existed in Jahiliyyah, like a cultural practice which existed in the time of Jahiliyyah. Like, for example, they believed, before Islam, they used to believe that if you have a son, but if you adopt a son, then that adopted son becomes exactly like your actual son, which means that if he marries somebody, you can't, and then he divorces that person, you can't marry that woman, right? She becomes your mahram. Islam wanted to show that, look, these things which you and I say they're just things which we make up. There's no reality in it. Yes, you can love a person as your son, but that doesn't make them your real blood son, okay? So in order to get rid of these jahil practices, that's another reason why the Holy Prophet married. And there's other reasons too. One of the reasons is there were some women who, like, they were widows. All of the wives of the Holy Prophet were widows except one, and others did not wish to marry them. And there's lots of details behind these things, which the further you go into it, the more clear it becomes for you. But it becomes a little bit difficult to talk about in public because of the controversies that surround it, especially in today's world, within the Muslim world and outside as well. But yeah, there were reasons. There was always a hikmah behind each and every one of these marriages. And in the context of it makes a lot of sense. Salama, I believe, is one of for one final example, is she gifted herself to the Prophet. Yeah, I mean, what he was doing is looking after these women. Back in the day, generally speaking, women were almost holistically financially dependent on men, right? And so in order to take a wife, it's not like today, you know, you get married and then you get divorced. No, when you take a wife in Islam particularly, it becomes a huge responsibility on the man's shoulders to not only look after her financially and give her that, you know, that comfort that she's used to, but also to look after her emotionally, right? So it was a huge burden. And the Holy Prophet was actually showing the ummah how to deal with these various issues. Yeah, I mean, if I go into it in any more detail, it'll probably start to get a bit controversial. So yeah, there were reasons, and do research into it because it is interesting. And you'll discover things which most people don't even know about.
Okay, this next one is rapping haram?
Rapping, rapping. Oh, as we said, brother, I'm guessing it's a brother. I don't know why I'm guessing it's a brother. It's probably a brother. Rapping, again, you have to look at the criteria outlined by the Maraji. If you're going to make a rap song, which is about dunya, which is about, you know, women and cars and materialism, and it's just going to make people jahil, it's haram. But if you're going to rap to spread the religion of Islam in an appropriate way, then it's a beautiful thing. And rap, when it originally started, since we talked about Shaheed Malcolm X and, you know, the slave trade and black culture in America, when rap actually started, it wasn't what it has become today. It was actually known as the poetry of the street. And it was used in a way to help black people liberate themselves from the oppressive, you know, ruling racist class of America. And they were rapping in order to expose the enemy of the time, America. Now, if you notice what's happened, the mainstream has completely diverted what rap was originally meant to be. And they just made it completely into la'ibun wa lahu, completely into just vanity. So yeah, if you're doing it for dunya, no, it's haram. If you're doing it for Allah, it's halal. And just a very quick point, if you're saying that you're doing it for Allah just to make an excuse for yourself, but in reality you're doing it for dunya, it's still haram, okay? So just be aware of that, and when you do something, try to do it with utmost sincerity, and then see what happens, inshallah.
Okay, this next one is Islam evolves through the years. When can you tell when practices become bid'ah and when it is just a different expression of religion?
Yeah, very, very good. Okay, so what happens is, and I'll give you some food to think about because that's a really like lengthy and deep discussion, but I'll give you a quick pointer to think about. Okay, so when does a practice become bid'ah? Okay, think about this. Okay, when does the Muslim Ummah start to adopt certain practices and why? Okay, so a practice may be adopted in order to spread a certain facet of Islam, right? So a practice, like the brother just used rap, okay? So you adopt rap and you start to use this rap because it is relevant to today in order to spread Islam. But let's say like 10, 15, 100 years from now, that same rap, which would be effective in today's world, in 100 years from now, it becomes outdated it becomes boring. It becomes just something that people are doing to, pass time. I don't know. It just becomes something which, for whatever reason, it becomes a hindrance towards actually spreading Islam and making our youths and our people aware of Islam. At that point, it should be very easy to say, this thing's outdated now. Let's just get rid of it. It's not actually helping the cause of Islam anymore. But if at that point, the community, there's an uproar and they say, no, we've been doing this for years, we have to continue it. At that point, that thing has just become a kind of idol for the community. So look, when it comes to bid'ah, I would say, generally look towards the Maraji, in particular, look towards Imam Khamenei, because he is constantly pointing out the flaws of our society and showing us what things we should be doing and what things we shouldn't be doing in today's time. And it's all Islam. Remember, Islam is always relevant to the society that we're living in. It's never something which is irrelevant. And very quickly, when it comes to bid'ah, it's very tricky discussing this, because we're not supposed to take those things which the kuffar are doing, which the disbelievers are doing, and try to make it Islamified and just package it in Islam. But essentially, it's just the same thing. So yeah, I mean, it's a lengthy discussion, but I hope I've given you a little bit of food for thought on that subject.
Okay, Ahsan. This next one is how to identify the uncle danger and how to avoid them.
It's not just uncle danger. Look, a lot of the uncles listening to this right now are going to feel personally attacked, and they're probably going to talk to me after this session, and they're going to be like, why did you have to do that? And they're going to be like, I didn't like the lecture. They won't admit why they didn't like the lecture, but that will be why. It's not just uncles, it's aunties too. You have to find out, are you one of these danger people? Are you a house Muslim? That was the point, okay? It's not just uncle danger, it's not just auntie danger. Anybody could be doing this, fulfilling this role of a house Muslim. And in order to identify them, look at those who, when you try to do something revolutionary, you try to do something for the sake of Islam, you try to do something particularly which is new or innovative or against the enemies of the time, or, pointing out the flaws of the society, and then those people hold you back. They might be well-wishers, by the way. Don't become a maverick. Don't just go out there, I don't care, guns blazing, no. Listen to people, take them into consideration at the same time. But the more your understanding of what Islam actually says to do increases, the easier it will be for you to identify those people who are house Muslims. And those who are, one way to identify them is they will praise the Taghut. What does the Quran tell us? Allah waliyulladhina amanu yukhrijuhum min al-dhulumati ila an-nur. Allah is the wali, the guardian of those who believe. He takes them out of the darkness and takes them into the light. But the kafirin, the kuffar, they're completely different. وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَوْلِيَاؤُهُمُ الطَّاغُوتُ. And those who disbelieve, their wali, their guardian is the one who is the taghut, the tyrannical system, the system of kufr. يُخْرِجُونَهُم مِّنَ النُّورِ إِلَى الظُّلُمَاتِ. He takes them out of the light into the darknesses. So look for those people who are praising the Taghuti system. And on top of that, look for those people who, when somebody is opposing the Taghuti system, they stop them from opposing it. Okay? I hope that answered your question a little bit.
Okay, next one is, why is it wajib to read namaz in Arabic when it can sometimes be difficult to understand what you're saying? You are just reciting things. Would namaz be accepted read in your first language?
No. The prayers have to be prayed in Arabic. That too in proper Arabic. So you should always be trying and attempting to improve your Arabic. Why? I can't tell you. Like I said, when it comes to the ahkam, we submit. We say, this is the ruling, we follow it. Otherwise, you can spend your entire life saying, why did Allah say that Maghrib is 3 rakats and Fajr is 2 rakats? I think Maghrib should be 4 rakats. I think it should be 10 rakats. No, the ahkam has outlined certain things for us, and we might not always know the wisdom behind it, but there always is a wisdom behind it. And sometimes Allah knows and we don't know, and sometimes Allah informs us. For example, like there might have been a time where they asked, why is pig meat haram? I think it should be halal. Now, through modern science, we understand how unhealthy it is for people, etc. Right? And there's other examples too. Now, I can highlight some of the wisdoms that may be part of the reason why Allah has sanctioned for us to recite it in Arabic. One of the wisdoms might be, look at other religions. Look at particularly Christianity. The religion which they were given, which they were presented to by the Prophet Isa was perfect. It was pure. But what happened? A lot of it got changed. And how was it changed? Through the translation. You see, most Christians don't read the original Aramaic. They actually read the Latin. Or at most it will be the Latin, but most of them actually just read the English. And when you translate any word from one language to another, the meaning will inevitably change. There's no way about it, okay? So I'll give you one example. The Arabic is so deep and it has so much meaning within a single word. There's so much depth there. No other language is like that. Qur'anan Arabiyyan. Allah says that He has revealed for us Qur'anan Arabiyyan. He has revealed for us an Arabic Qur'an so that you will understand, so that you will reflect, okay? And I'll give you an example. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. If you try and translate it, it's all praise be to Allah. The meaning's been actually changed. You have to go back to the Arabic because that is not actually all-encompassing of what Alhamdulillah actually means. I'll give you another example, a better example to better illustrate this point. Subhanallah. When we go into ruku' or sujood and we say Subhanallah 3 times, how do we translate this? Glory be to Allah. Okay. That's one way of looking at it. But if you ask those who actually understand the deeper meaning behind subhan and tasbih and tasbih, it actually means Allah is free of all of those attributes which limit Him. There's no English word to describe that. Subhanallah is the only way to say it. And we translate it as glory be to Allah, but actually it's the closer meaning to it would be all negative and weak attributes He's free from those things. That's why some people will translate this as Allah is perfect compared to all other things. And that might be a little bit closer. Okay. And the translation will always alter the meaning. And you need to be conscious of this. At the same time, I don't want you to think, there's no point in reading the translation. No. Read the translation. Try to understand more of what the Arabic is saying. Read the translation and read the Arabic as well when it comes to the Quran. And the prayers have to be recited in proper Arabic. Inshallah, may Allah help us to increase and improve our Arabic. Brother, are there any more questions?
They are flowing today.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love it when you throw questions.
I'm just trying to go with the order that I'm receiving in. So if you have some time, I can continue.
Okay, let's take 1 or 2 more questions. Let's see.
Okay. This one is why kuffar and mushrikeen would be punished in the hellfire forever?
Niyyah, it comes down to your intentions. This is a beautiful question, by the way. And if you just think about it for a moment. So the question is this, look, okay, so let's say a person is good. Let's say a person is good. They can only be good for the whole of their lives, but even that life, let's say they live maximum for 100 years. They've only been good for 100 years. Why should they be rewarded for eternity? Forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Why? And similarly, somebody who's committed let's say that they've committed the worst of sins, but they've only done it for maximum 100 years. Let's say from the moment they turned baligh, they were sinning. They were on a drive. They were just sinning. They didn't stop sinning and then they dropped dead. Even then, they've only sinned for 100 years. Why should they be punished for an eternity? Surely they should only be rewarded for 100 years or punished for 100 years. Why an eternity? Okay. The answer comes in a dialogue between Prophet Dawood and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Prophet Dawood asked this question to Allah. I believe it was Prophet Dawood, so don't quote me on that. But anyway, he said that, look, why? And Allah said, Ya Dawood, it is because if the believer had been on earth for an eternity, he would have worshipped me and been obedient to me for an eternity. And if the disbeliever was on earth for an eternity, he would have continued to disobey me for an eternity. So the answer is niyyah, intention. Allah looks at the heart of the person. And this is why so many people, when they go to the hereafter, they'll say, send me back just for one day. And Allah will say, you're not going back. You're not going to get another chance. Brothers and sisters, elders, there is a very important point in this for us all to contemplate on. What you become at the end of your life, this life is your only opportunity. And if Allah had given you an eternity, this is it. This is what you would have done with it. Never think to yourself, one day I'm going to become really, really good. No, now is what matters. Okay, so this comes down to niyyah, dear brother, and it's about your intention. Those people who will be punished and rewarded for an eternity is because of what they would have been in this world for an eternity. We'll have one more question, I think.
Okay, what is Islam's stance on evolution? I personally keep bouncing back and forth between theistic evolutionist.
I love this question, but I don't have time to answer that right now.
And then
I love this question. I actually wanted to give a lecture about it, but then one of my friends, Uncle Danger, he told me, no, right now, not the time, you know. I'm joking, no, astaghfirullah.
And then there is a verse quoted as well as part of the question. So,
Bismillah.
Does this verse support evolution? Double quote starts, if he wills, he can do away with you and give succession after you to whomever he wills, just as he produced you from the descendants of another people.
Absolutely. And by the way, that's again a repetition of the scariest verse, which I recited at the end. Yeah, you're right. Okay, so yes and no, just very quickly, yes and no. There is, I do believe that evolution had a role in shaping human beings, definitely. I think Allah, whenever he creates somebody or something, he generally always, creates them through a process. Now, the argument here is, what was that process? Now, the theory of evolution, as it's been presented, Darwinism itself, does it contradict Islam? That is the question. And right now, because we don't have time and it's a very lengthy question, I'll just give you some food for thought. Allah doesn't create anything without a purpose, without a father or a mother, without a process. Like if he wants to, he can, you know, and the final verses of Surah Yasin highlight for us that he says, kun fayakun. If he wanted to create something like that without any process, he could. But he doesn't, generally speaking. And actually this idea of, you know, human beings originating from animals, perhaps when the Quran is talking about us being created from clay and stuff, is actually a metaphor, and it's talking about our creation from the dust. So this theory does exist, and there are some, by the way, prominent scholars who do believe in this. But because this is going to become like, I know look, I don't want people to go away and start talking about this right now, although it is fascinating. We want to leave it at this. Look, does it impact you? If it doesn't impact you and it has no effect on you, how Allah created us, maybe he created us through the process of evolution, or maybe he didn't. If it impacts you, then sure, you know, think about it, contemplate about it. If it doesn't impact you, then don't waste time thinking about these things too much, because there's actually a prayer where we say, oh Allah, save me from that knowledge which does not benefit me. All right, so I want to leave it on that note, and maybe we can have a private discussion sometime about it, or maybe Allah will give us the tawfiq to actually discuss it, because I do personally find this whole discussion very, very fascinating. May Allah help us to identify the house Muslims. May Allah help us to not become among the house Muslims. May Allah help us to bring the fight to the oppressors, to the shaitan. May Allah help us to become that hero that Imam Zaman, inshallah, is waiting for us to become. And I'll leave you with this one thought and this hadith, where it says that if the taghut of your time, if the oppressive system of your time, if the oppressor, the tyrant of your time, is not agitated